I've got a couple of really nice Black Acacia stumps that a friend gave me. I've already got this one chainsawed in half. Now I'm going to take the second one and cut it right along the pith. From there, I'll take it into the bandsaw and rough it into a cylinder. After studying this piece of Black Acacia for a while, I've decided to cut it right about here at roughly about 9 inches long. That way I can get a nice large hollow vessel out of the top, and then where this inclusion occurs here, I can get 2 smaller hollow vessels out of this end of it. So what I like to do is take these circles that I've bandsawed out of some 1/4 inch thick MDF, take my screw gun and just screw these to the top. That way I can just follow the outline of that circle and bandsaw it pretty close, and I will have a roughed out cylinder. I've got one set up over here at 6 inches and this other one here at 7 inches. Now the best thing to do once you've got these bands sawn into rounds is to put it on the lathe and turn it right away, because this is green wood. I got busy this past week and I didn't have time to turn it, so I put it into one of these plastic garbage bags, and this just slows down the moisture evaporation process. So from here I can open this up and go put it on the lathe. I like to use a faceplate, and I've decided to work on this larger one first. I've already marked out a circle here in pencil where the center is, and this double stick tape will just help to give me a little bit of a grip here so it doesn't slide around. I'm going to use a Vicks bit and use this to pre-drill these holes. Next I'll use my impact driver to set these screws, which are 1 1/4 inches long. The faceplate is by far the strongest way to hold this heavy block of wood on the lathe. This wet blank of Black Acacia weighs close to 30 pounds, and using that faceplate will be by far the safest way to hold this thing on the lathe. Now that I've got this locked in place, I can bring up the tailstock, and this will lock it down between centers. As you can see, I've got a wide variety of tools to choose from here. Lots of gouges, some negative rake scrapers, various hollowing tools. But my tool of choice is going to be the 3/4 inch spindle roughing gouge. I have my platform set at 40 degrees. I've darkened the edge of my spindle roughing gouge with a magic marker. And this is probably the most easiest tool to grind. We're just going to introduce it to the wheel, hold it flat on the platform, and rotate it left and right. This is a slow speed grinder with an 80 grit ceramic wheel. So I keep firm pressure on the platform, and then just slowly rotate it. Now, one of the most important things to know about wood turning is the direction of the grain. That's why when I teach, I like to use a bundle of soda straws, and I'll also put a pencil in there, because when you're turning, you want to cut the same way you would cut a pencil or sharpen a pencil. You're going to be cutting from the large diameter down to the smallest diameter. The soda straws represent a tree. So the way a tree grows is typically with straight grain going up, and then the end grain is going to wick up the moisture and minerals and water from the ground. Now when we turn, if we have something mounted between centers and the grain is running this way, then the spindle roughing gouge is a great tool to use because it's going to get a peeling cut, just peeling those fibers away. Later on, after I've got the shape roughed out, I'll go to a bowl gouge because that will address the end grain on the ends. You never want to use a spindle roughing gouge on end grain. It'll catch and dig in, and this thin tang might break. Another thing that is critical to wood turning is the height of the tool rest. I have mine set so that the cutting edge of my spindle roughing gouge will be located at right about center. When I go to make my cuts, I'm going to introduce the tool here, drop the handle, and look to get the bevel engaged. So as this starts to rotate, I'm getting a nice peeling slice. One final word before we start is that the speed control is really important. I like having an electronic variable speed control, and I'll start it by setting it at the slowest speed possible. So you can see that's turning very slowly. I can gradually turn up the speed, check for any vibration, and I'll just turn it up until it feels safe and there's not that much vibration. So as you can see, it doesn't take too long to rough wet wood into a cylinder. I've got some areas here that had some separation. There's like a bark inclusion over here. So some of these areas I'm going to take down a little bit more. Now we all know that wood turning is a lot of fun, but in the end, after all these chips have fallen, the most important thing is the form. So here's a small piece of olive wood that I've turned. This has been drying for over 20 years. And I really like the shape of this hollow vessel. I'm going to use this as a model and try to map out something similar on this piece of Black Acacia. Let's take a look. I know that when I true up the top, I'm going to lose some material here. And then down here at the bottom, I need to allow for the screws. So I'm going to come in at least about 1 inch over here, maybe a little bit more. That gives us roughly, around 8 inches of height to work with. The parting tool is a great way to establish those parameters. Time to sharpen up the 3/8 inch bowl gouge. I'm going to start by laying the flute all the way over on its side, line it up with that 40-degree line right there, and then just go back and forth. And then I'll do the other side, roll the flute onto the other side, line it up with that line, go back and forth, and then roll it down into the middle to round that nose. End grain is always best cut from the side. So for that, I'm going to use my 3/8 inch bowl gouge. I've got it sharpened up. I'll get the bevel in contact, and then I will use this to start pushing down towards the center. Bevel's in contact with the wood. As I push in, I can steer the handle to grab some of that end grain. And you can see how cleanly that'll slice that off. On this side, I'm going to take it all the way down to the faceplate. Well, another day, another plastic bag, but it works. This will keep the moisture from drying out because I had to let it sit overnight while I got some other work done. So let's unwrap this and see what we've got here. All right, everything looks good. No cracks. So the next thing I'm going to do is to drill this out. I've got some number 3 Morse taper drill bits. These will fit into the tailstock, and I can use this to bore out the center. I always like to start with this bit, which is shorter, because it's going to be more stout, stronger. It'll give me more of a stable, centered hole. Now that I've gone as far as I can, I'll eject this one and replace it with a longer one. And this one will put me all the way to the bottom. I'm going to leave about 7/8 at the bottom. And yeah, so I'm going to be drilling right to that line right there. This is what's known as a twice-turned hollow vessel. That means I turn it once when it's wet, and then I dry it. I'm going to rough turn it, rough hollow it, take it down to maybe about a 1-inch wall thickness, let it dry, and then once it's dry, I'm going to fit it with a threaded insert. So this is a piece of African blackwood. I've turned a collar on it, and so what I like to do is cut threads in these African blackwood inserts, and then after it's dry, this can be fitted into the top. I'll have a lid that I'll be able to screw on. So using my olive wood vessel as a model, I've decided that I'll leave roughly about 3 inches in diameter here at the top, and I'm going to target the high shoulder just about 2 inches or so down from the top. This will give me a good, starting point, something to aim for. And if I have 3 inches at the top and roughly 3 inches at the bottom, I can start to shape to those points. I put the cone center on, so this way it's trapped between centers. I've got my spindle roughing gouge, which will still work for part of this shaping. I've repositioned my tool rest to a 45-degree angle. Now I'm using my Thompson Tools 1/2-inch bowl gouge, and I've got this set so that the cutting edge will be right about at center. I've been working on other jobs for the past 3 days, so let's come back to this project and take a look. Once again, the plastic bag has done a good job of holding that moisture in there. You can see all the dampness here, the grain and the fibers of the wood. I've discovered several knots along the way, and they cause, some occasional skipping problems while you're turning. So far the shape's looking pretty good. I took some more off of the base here. And now what I want to do is take some more off of the top and try to get a little bit closer to the shape of this olive wood vessel. I've sharpened up my 3/8-inch bowl gouge with a 40-degree grind on the wings and a 40-degree grind on the nose. And I also have relieved the heel here a bit so that this last bit can stay in contact and I can ride the bevel. I've drawn a line 2 inches down from the top, and I'm going to focus on this area from here to here and just start to scoop this out and make that curve become a concave curve. So it matches something similar to the shape of this olive wood vessel that I like. So one of the things that I really like about using a faceplate is that you can unscrew it, take it off the lathe, put it back on the lathe, and it's going to be metal to metal, so you're going to have a positive fit. I also like to put a background and stand these up just so I can really study the form and get a better idea of the final shaping. As I look at it now, I think I want to take a little bit more off the top of this shoulder. So I'll put it back on the lathe and remove some material right around in that area. There's an age-old expression. If you ask 10 different woodworkers how to do something, you're going to get at least 10 different answers, maybe 20. So anyway, what I'll show you here is how I like to do hollowing. I started hollowing vessels back in the late 90s, and I soon discovered I like a lathe with an electronic variable speed control. I like to use a center steady to stabilize it. I like these heavy duty wheels, and I like to use a torque arrest boring bar. To start out here, to navigate this initial curve, I'm using this John Jordan hook tool, which has a 3/4 inch shaft, and it fits into the Lyle Jameson hollow vessel system, which I have. So we're going to start out here. This one has a laser dot, so I've set it for 3/4 inch. And I'll just go inside and begin starting to hollow this out. You can see here that there's an adjustment up on top, which swivels and moves back and forth. And I can use this to set that laser dot right where I want it at 3/4 inch. Once I move the bar inside, you can see that that laser is going to show up on the outside wall. Every so often I'll stop and sharpen the tip here. I'll take a Sharpie, just darken up that edge. Then I'll come back with a 180 grit diamond hone. A little dab of oil on there. And then just do some strokes pushing up. Then you can feel a little burr on that edge. I've got my platform set at 70 degrees. 70 degrees is the angle that this cutter is sharpened at. What you want to do is go from the outside of the stone towards the center. Do that on both sides with a rounded nose, and that should get it sharp. A little bit more right there at the tip. I've got the system set up with the straight cutter now, so now I'll go inside and move from the center out towards the outside wall. speed up the process, I've installed the carbide cutter here. As you can see, I've got the laser set up once again at 3/4 of an inch. So once again, I'll take the cutter, I'll go into the center and start pulling that out towards the left. Well, at this point, the piece is rough hollowed out. We can take a peek in the inside, but it's kind of hard to see in there. You kind of get a general idea. But I'll take it off and put it on the scale, weigh it, and then wax it, and then set it aside to dry. Well, this turned out really nice. I'm quite happy with it. So now we'll just remove the faceplate, and then I'll weigh it. So this started out as a 30-pound block of wet black acacia, and now after rough turning and rough hollowing, I've got it down to 4.3 pounds. I'll make a note of that. Oh, it just shifted to 4. Close enough. I've written the date and the weight on there. That way I have a reference to come back to later. I'm using a product called Anchor Seal, which is essentially a liquid wax. I'm just going to give this a generous coating, and especially on the end grain. Some good coverage on there. All of this end grain is where it's going to lose moisture the fastest. So coat this really well and then let it dry. Then I'll just set it in a corner of my shop and check on it periodically.